In case you're interested, Sam Seder and Ezra Klein had a debate in abundance liberalism. I thought it was a really good convo. Good in the sense that Sam Seder suplexed him through the desk. I mean, what's the bar for good here? An hour, 27 minutes. I really don't like Ezra Klein.
I think becomes problematic where these two things meet, because your identification
Bleh.
of the primary problem, right? I mean, this is the point. Like the you don't address moneyed interest per se in the book. The primary problem is, I mean, if you just do a summary of the book, primary problem has to do more with the...
Ezra kept insisting profit motive is not the biggest issue. Well, yeah, like I said, like this is just another liberal hack rebranding meant to direct attention away from any critique of capitalism and towards some new innovative bullshit. Real capitalism hasn't been tried. Direct your attention away from the actual sources of our woes. Pay no mind to the enormous increase in wealth inequality or the fact that overwhelmingly all the harms, ills, inequalities in society are being caused by the gulf in class interest between people who own and have wealth and people who don't and don't. And make sure to exclude the left. They're always so fucking snide in their prescriptions. It's incredible. It's like Klein, Iglesias, they all have the same tone. This snide, sniveling, sneering, to use another S word, attitude where they, despite often being like very wrong, right? Like tripping over themselves quite often, being on the wrong side of a bunch of obvious predictions, they then get really smug and act as though the left is the one that can't properly understand the issue. Yeah, like they're the only adults in the room, except they've been talking about politics publicly for 15 years or more, and they haven't figured out that capitalism's the problem yet. I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, especially in this environment, man, I feel like the average, like, know-nothing, lumpenprole, liberal Democrat voter understands that capitalism is the issue more than these people, whose job is being a smug counterexample to leftism.
Regulation and the handcuffing the state has done of itself. But the state doesn't do it itself. Like, all of this handcuffing comes from a place, and it's either moneyed interests or it's not. And so I have no doubt that at different times...
This is where I think you've really oversimplified politics. I want to try to find the right example, because I think if we stay high, we just are like yelling about this abstract question of money. But let's talk. We both believe in decarbonization.
I think that's really grounded, though.
Hold on, but let's talk about it from this perspective. We both believe in decarbonization, right? Climate change is a problem.
Yes.
And we sort of see the pathway on that is we have to build a lot of green energy to reorient our economy so you can run a modern economy on a green energy basis. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So to do that, you have to move all this energy production over to renewable sources, and then you have to get the energy from where it currently is, right? A solar farm, a wind farm, a hydroelectric, project, whatever it is, and run it through transmission lines to where we...
The gesturing to vague nuance pisses me off so much. Yeah. It's always the claim like, well, when you're ready to have an intelligent conversation about these problems, the adults are waiting in the next room for you. They say to lefties, well, then you look at their conversations and they're utterly retarded. Like, I see, like, genuinely, like, their prescriptions to so many of these issues are just, like, they betray a complete misunderstanding of, like, Iglesias consistently, on Twitter at least, will talk about how the only way for the Democrats to succeed and win the public platform is to propose policies that people agree with, but doesn't seem to acknowledge the idea that the Democrats are capable of changing people's minds on an issue. Like, he utterly refuses to acknowledge the possibility that by being very dogmatic on a position that is correct, you can move people over to it. Kind of like how Republicans made their own agree with January 6th. Or believe that Derek Chauvin was unfairly prosecuted, Like, you can actually change people's minds. You don't have to just limply accept whatever the current polling opinions are and go along with them. You can actually, like, work within that to try to expand what people are interested in, like the Republicans have successfully done for such a long time.
Plug shit into the wall and charge it. I have done a lot of coverage of this failure point because we are, to be perfectly clear about this, failing to build enough transmission lines. There is no world in which our decarbonization strategy works if we cannot increase by orders of magnitude how fast we are building transmission lines. There is money trying to build transmission lines. There is money trying to slow down the building of transmission lines. Just walking into this process and saying, where's the money, doesn't get you anywhere. Like, I have talked.
This is so incomprehensibly dull on so many levels. Sorry, I don't mean like boring, though it is to hear him talk. I also mean like stupid. Basically, Sam Seder's argument is that in many of these like social problems, you can identify how the influence of big money is causing a sort of like a negative outcome. And Ezra Klein's answer is, well, money can be used to hurt or harm in an industry. So like, how can you say where the money is? Like, how does that fix it?
Talk to the private equity figures trying to get a transmission line built. I have also talked to the green, New Dealers trying to get that same transmission line built. And I've also seen the people standing in the way of it who have all their reasonable and good arguments. I don't find when I dig into these things that the way I can just...
Did he really have to precede this argument with a minute-long explanation of how green energy works? Hey, we both believe in fighting climate change, so we both agree you have to build like solar panels, right? So we both agree that like for the solar panel to be useful, the energy has to be like routed through wires, and then it has to go through like transformers, and then it eventually ends up in your house that you have to plug in, right? Okay, now that we've established that, there's money on both sides, so how can you really say what's good? Move it along.
Zoning requirements, or the everything bagel liberalism that is creating the barrier to build, housing. We can look at the CHIPS Act, and that was also something that had everything bagel liberalism built into it, which apparently, as far as I can tell, up until Donald Trump shows up, was quite effective. The timeline of things, definitely, of course.
Hold. They went back and answered one of my critiques on the CHIPS Act. If you go back to that original piece, one of the things I'm saying is that they've loaded a lot into this bill, but taken nothing away. After that piece comes out, President Joe Biden signs a bill from Ted Cruz and Mark Kelly exempting the CHIPS Act from environmental review under the theory, as the administration says, that we cannot allow this to be delayed for years and years under environmental review. So you can think that's bad or good, but if you want to say the CHIPS Act is going smoothly and well, it's in part because they took the critique.
Well, I think there are instances, and you talk about I-95, for instance, what Shapiro was able to do.
Pennsylvania.
The idea that, and my argument is, without that equity, you do get people living in apartments that are going to slowly kill them or give them asthma or higher asthma rates. Without that equity, you are going to destroy a neighborhood, and like we saw it in Worcester, and like with generational impact. But I also think, as a political matter, it is extremely difficult, unless there is some type of buy-in from everybody, that there are circumstances that qualify as an emergency or an urgency that give you the political ability to do something like this. So, for instance, in the I-95 thing, you cite that as an example of where this type of like power, sort of centralized power to bypass this stuff, is effective, and it was very effective in that moment.
Relies too much on earlier context from the debate. Here, I'll hold. Let me listen to like a little snippet.
The idea that you can peel them apart, that you could say, oh, this bucket is policy, this bucket is politics, is not at all how I look at that question.
Yeah, and I guess we'll start with the policy side first. But broadly, my critique is there seems to be an absence of, well, I think the culprits that you've chosen in some instances are correct, but broadly speaking, there's an absence of analysis of power dynamics, I think, that and the interplay of money and politics, or I should say power in our society, I think is problematic. I mean, I think that, look, there have been questions about specific policies and assumptions I've read critiques about your assessment of why China is able to do certain things and whatnot. But and I also think the power questions really filter through a lot of what you perceive to be problematic. And then I think broadly, I think it's also difficult to understand like how this is going to function as a political question. But we will get to all of that.
Second. We'll do the second in a minute.
But let's do the policy.
Let me talk about power. Let me talk about power. I have been interested to see this critique develop. And I just had Zephyr teach out on my show. There's an episode with her and Shoykat Chakrabarti called Abundance in the Left that I think people would be interested to hear sort of do the power debate at some length. I think this has been very revealing to me about what my friends on the left, and I think of myself usually as on the left, though, a liberal, not a leftist, I guess, mean when they say power. I think this is a book entirely about power. But it is a book that treats power highly situationally. So there is a structure of power that arranges itself around, say, a housing development in San Francisco. That is a different structure of power than arranges itself around the question of can you build interstate transmission lines, which is a different structure of power than arranges itself around the question of can you site rural broadband and build that in the way that you want to, which is a different structure of power.
Why are they ideologically boring? Because the way you avoid drawing attention to the fact that capital is responsible for these issues broadly is by hyperfixating on a bunch of very specific low-level issues so that essentially you can't see the forest for the trees. Literally, that's it. That's it. You have massive, demonstrable relationships between wealth and capital influence and political power and so on. Enormously, you'd have to be an idiot. You'd have to be delusional. You'd have to be psychotic not to see that. It's obvious. Everyone agrees. Both sides of the aisle agree on that. But if you go down to like little, tweedly little issues, well, on one hand, don't like hippie activists have a kind of power because by chaining yourself to a tree, you're preventing a construction project from being completed. That's not derived from capital. You scale the conversation down to these tiny, boring, tedious little nothing policy decisions rather than focusing on broader influence. You know, for Ezra Klein, it's like, you know, you ask a fish how water tastes when you drink it. It doesn't compute to them. You know, they're not really following along on those big picture issues, or they pretend not to.
Than you see in a bunch of the other cases in the book. And one thing we are attempting to do over and over and over again is get extremely granular about what is happening.
Well, in his own words, if you will.
So one thing that bothers me about the power analysis that I hear on the left, let's take housing, because I always think it's very important to ground things in like a specific case.
Do you see?
Texas builds more housing than California. It builds more housing than New York. When people move to Austin and Houston and Dallas, they build homes. When people move to San Jose and San Francisco and Los Angeles, they don't. Is your view, do you find it a credible view to say that the issue is Texas has solved the corporate power problem, but California is permeable to corporate power and dominated by oligarchy in a way that Texas, or for that matter, Florida, is not?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily, I think it's not.
So, okay, I'm curious to see how Sam answers this because, like, the answer is pretty obvious, right? Well, I should say the general answer is obvious, which is that capital influence is A, multifaceted, and B, not the only kind of influence, right? For example, with housing policy specifically, we're talking about, you know, laws that are passed locally, often to favor reliable constituents who vote reliably, who tend to be older people, who tend to be wealthier people, i.e. homeowners. Homeowners are usually like a pretty reliable base you want to target when you're a city councilman or mayor and you're looking to get either reelected or you're looking to be like thought of favorably. So as a consequence, you have this interplay where there's the influence of like big like construction companies and realtors, but there's also potentially millions and millions of private homeowners who want to see their house price continue to remain high. And the interplay between these is complicated, genuinely. But that's not to say that the capital influence isn't there. You could say so much about the influence of like on individual towns. You like in small towns, for example, you can have so much property being brought up or bought up by like a single property management company that then like raises the rents massively because they control, well, the rent in the area. Effectively, they have the ability to do that. Or you know, the extent to which these realtor companies or construction companies work with the city governments and their zoning laws to maximize the amount of money they get off each construction. Like how when they say, oh, we're building like a new high rise in Los Angeles, motherfucker, is that high rise going to be for low income individuals? Of course not. They don't pay as much in rent. It's going to be a luxury high rise with maybe the legal minimum number of low income residencies within who are all crowded around somewhere in the middle of the building. You know, the idea that the relationship here is complicated, meaning that it's not capital influence, it's asinine. It's frankly, it's low IQ. But always the deference to imagine nuance from the liberals. The thing that really chuffs me is that the original liberals would have thought Ezra Klein an idiot and the abundance liberal types. The original liberals, I don't know, you want to go to, you know, Smith or whatever, they would have been freaking the out about landlords and capital influence in the world today. Oh, you're telling me everyone gets all of their news from 3 tech companies that are owned by the 3 wealthiest people on earth? And they single-handedly control all the information that like 90% of the population gets? You're telling me Murdoch owns a significant share in news distribution, not just in one, but in multiple countries? You're telling me that thousands of local TV agencies, news stations have been bought up by like a single group, and that one group enforces continual and uniform messaging across them, and people at a local level can't tell because they're just looking at their local station. They're not like cross-referencing what their local station says compared to others. Like the original liberals would have been ringing the alarm bells and freaking the out. But now you have grifters and do-nothings who exist to tell lefties to calm down, basically.
Not necessarily corporate power. I think what we're talking about is money. I think we're just talking about money. And
so Texas has solved the money in politics problem.
See, that asinine, like, actually, this is why I hate people like this. He is deliberately obfuscating truth in the pursuit of a reductio ad absurdum, right? Like, Sam was 2 seconds into his answer, and Ezra Klein's like, oh, you're saying Texas has solved money? So a problem that involves money is different in Texas and California, but it's better in Texas. So they've solved it. They've solved capitalism then. It's not about finding truth or understanding. It's just about, like, smarmy, contrarian, smug, holier than thou bullshit. I'm sorry. I do hate this guy. What's abundance liberalism? Is it just neoliberalism rebranded? No. These people are worse than neoliberals. They're smug internet contrarians who make a living from stirring up controversy. That whenever they rebrand themselves with some, oh, this is why Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All proposal is bad, even though it objectively would save more money than our current system and also help a bunch of people. Whenever they come out with their new something, it's just a way of staying relevant in the face of a world that is moving further and further away from them. It has nothing to do with like any underlying principles. Actual neoliberals, like the people who believe in neoliberalism, have written about and written critiques on capital influence in the housing market. You know, it's not like neoliberals don't understand the relationship between, you know, capital and political power. They're just, I would say, much more permissive to it than I am. You know, it's whatever.
Like California is not.
Well, I can tell you that, like, if you want to compare, let's say, San Francisco to Houston, right? You just have a lot more space in Houston. You have a lot more money in San Francisco. And so the power that rests with the money is more concentrated, literally, right? And has the ability in those instances to stop this housing project or that housing project. Like, look at Austin, for instance. You bring up Austin. Mm-hmm. In the course of Austin, and this was, I read this in the review, because obviously I'm not studying Austin or San Francisco for that matter. But Joe Wiesenthal wrote, you know, that his observation about Austin was that it was cheap, and then it got very expensive, then there was, and it was a function of costs went up, rents went up. It became expensive there.
Rents have gone down in Austin because they built so much.
They built so much.
I really want to hold on what you said the first time.
But
San Francisco has concentrated money in a way that
there was no change in the building codes, for instance. Like the argument that
the building code responded in Austin. So you can just go look. You can. I mean, I don't know if you guys are able to pull up data on the show and show it, but just go pull it up if we can. You can search Fred housing starts in Austin and San Francisco. You could just do this in general. You can look at this analysis across blue and red cities.
But
what the difference? Hold on, let me just. I want to go through.
Isn't Austin a blue city? Did he mean states?
Through this example, but we can go through a bunch of them. Houston doesn't have a zoning code.
Houston?
That's why it's easier to build there. I mean, I was talking to a developer there, and he said, "Look, the thing everybody knows about Houston, if you're a developer, is it's a bad place to be a homeowner. It's a good place to be a developer." And this is what I mean when I say the whole book, in a way, is about power. That in these procedural questions, in this question of how do you get housing approved, what we have created in many blue cities is a lot of veto points. And that veto point can be used by corporate power. It can be used by moneyed interests. It can be used by local homeowners who are not power in the way we would normally think of them, but sure as hell are power when you're thinking about whether or not to build housing. It can be used by all sorts of players. And
sure, yeah, multiple parties have different kinds of power that they exercise to, they try to use their power to get what they want out of the local system.
So I think that one of the places where I quite diverge from some of my other friends on this is that I think when you create this...
But when he says some of my other friends, by the way, he means the left. When he keeps saying that, he means the left. They're always framing themselves in contrast to the left. Like, that's the whole... It's always the same goddamn attention bid, man. What it's enough. It's enough. Yeah, we're not your friend. It's crazy to be pulling this grift when the country is being destroyed. It's like, it's so bad, because it's one thing when it's like, oh, liberals and lefties, da-da-da, but like, holy shit, man, you're really coming out with like a new, with a new innovative, like, rhetorical whoopsie to try to waste everyone's time with re-explaining for the 50th time how, yes, capital influence does in fact have a deleterious effect on our, political and social systems. Obviously, they bought the election. Elon Musk is a partisan Nazi freak who runs a social media company and was also the vizier for a while. All the the wealthiest Silicon Valley dipshits showed up at Trump's inauguration, all like vying for power. It just but don't striking Amazon workers also have a kind of power that isn't capital power? You're right, Ezra Klein. I'm a super neoliberal now. You're right. When you're right, you're right. When you're right, you're right.